With the launch of 11th edition, we have a brand new galaxy map, and in this video, we are going to be exploring the new major war zones on that galaxy map. We're going to be briefly going over the lore behind each of these major war zones, and also what characters and armies are currently fighting there, and discussing what potentially this could mean for future narrative and story events, but also model releases going forward in this brand new edition. So let's jump in and let's get waffling. So if you focus on the video right now, the brand new galaxy map is in the background, and according to the Imperium, there is 7 major war zones that are currently going on across the galaxy. If we start from left to right, we have Bastior in the segmentum Pacificus, we've got the Cadian Gate, we've got Armageddon, of course, which has just launched with 11th edition, we have the Maelstrom, we have the Nephilim Sector, we have the Chalnath Expanse, and we also have the 500 worlds all the way in the Ultima segmentum. So let's start with the Bastior Sub Sector, because this actually launched last edition's narrative campaigns. The box was called Leviathan, and it was all about the 4th Tyrannic War hitting the segmentum Pacificus. So located within that segmentum Pacificus, Bastior contains vital warp routes that connect Imperial territories, making it a strategic lifeline for the Imperium. Now, during the opening stages of the 4th Tyrannic War, the region came under devastating attacks from previously undetected Tyranid splinter tendrils known as Grendulus, part of the monstrous Hive Fleet Leviathan. Now, system after system was consumed as the Tyranids swept through the Bastior subsector, overwhelming Imperial defenders and plunging entire worlds into darkness beneath the shadow of the warp. Now, if we look at the map of the Bastior subsector, you'll notice that there's 2 chapter worlds. One of the chapter worlds I want to focus on is the one called Sanctum. That belongs to the chapter of the White Templars. They were from the Sons of Dawn gene lineage. Now, that has been called into question in the later codexes, and we haven't resolved what gene lineage they actually do come from. For me, I'm still going to say they are Sons of Dawn, but they were one of the main chapters that were deployed fighting against the Tyranids in the segmentum Pacificus. But it wasn't only that chapter. The Imperial Fist also arrived under the command of Tor Garadon. Tor Garadon also brought the Phalanx, the big space station, probably one of the biggest weapons the Imperium has in its arsenal. That was deployed in the segmentum Pacificus to try and hold back the absolute countless hordes of Tyranids trying to break through. Also, other chapters were involved with some legendary characters. Marneus Calgar was there leading the Ultramarines. Severus Agaman of the Ultramarines, the first company captain, he also joined Calgar. We'll talk a little bit about them more in the latter part of the video, because they have returned to other war zones, which we're going to be mentioning in this video. You had other chapters like the Raven Guard and the Raptors, who also deployed in number to try and hold back this huge invasion by the Tyranids. Where are we now with the current lore of this? It's basically still happening. The Tyranids are still trying to break through into that segmentum Pacificus and make a beeline towards Terra. Yes, the Imperial Fist are still fighting there. The White Templars are still fighting there. Raptors, I'm sure there's some elements of the Ultramarines that did remain who didn't return with Calgar. So that is still a major battle that is going on. Is this edition, 11th edition, is when they're going to resolve that and we're going to get some more stories of that? Fingers crossed, because that's what a lot of us have been wanting throughout the entirety of 10th edition. And from the Bastior subsector, let's go to the Cadian Gate. Now, Cadia has been in our hearts since 8th edition, since Abaddon slung that black stone fortress at the planet and broke it into nothing but dust. From that, the Great Rift ripped across the galaxy and split it in half. But something even more terrible has now launched itself on the Cadian Gate and the surrounding areas, and that is none other than the demon Primarch Perturabo and his hordes of Iron Warriors, Demon Engines, and all other type of monsters that will make you run for cover. So with the ending of 10th edition, we got a narrative book that basically explained Perturabo's grand plan. The Iron Warriors have launched themselves upon the Cadian Sub Sector, upon the remains of Cadia, actually taking out Black Legion forces and claiming it in Perturabo and the Iron Warriors' name. Perturabo wants to siege the entire galaxy. He wants to take vital Imperial worlds, Forge worlds, get all their resources, and keep expanding outwards until the galaxy itself is his eternal fortress. Now, this basically means that Perturabo technically has now returned to the narrative, has now returned to real space, and myself and others predict that in this edition, 11th edition, Perturabo is going to be getting a model, another Demon Primarch returning to the narrative and also returning to the tabletop. This could also add, of course, with the Iron Warriors being the center of the story, even more Iron Warrior characters, maybe even more dedicated Iron Warrior units getting some love going forward on the tabletop and also in the lore itself. So when it comes to Cadia, it's still massively active and it's still massively happening. Now, the chapter that has answered the calls for distress is, of course, the Sons of Dawn. Lysander, along with the Imperial Fists, have launched a counterattack and are starting to push back some of the elements of the Iron Warriors. They've also been aided by the Black Templars, but a theory that has happened is that Lysander has sent a message to the Phalanx, which again is currently fighting in the Segmentum Pacificus against the Tyranids, and it seems that the last war protocol may be reenacted. And if that is the case, then that means all the Sons of Dawn come back together and form themselves as a legion again to fight a absolute vile foe. So we could be getting some big narrative stuff in the future if this all goes the way I hope it goes. So fingers crossed that does happen. Iron Warriors, Sons of Dawn, Perturabo. There's only one thing that's needed to make this pie complete. No, it's not cream. It's Rogo Dawn. Dawn lives, and I hope he comes back soon. And from the Cadian Gate, let's jump to the current narrative launch setting for 11th edition, and that is Armageddon. Armageddon is under attack once again. I think this makes it the 6th, 7th war? Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, of Armageddon, and it's Gazskull again. He's launched himself on the planet. There's absolutely countless numbers of orcs, probably the biggest orc war fleet invasion we've ever witnessed, and his goal is to take Armageddon back for the orcs, because of course Armageddon is Ullanor. Ullanor is the terror for the orcs. It's what drives them insane to try and get this planet back. But of course, the Imperium won't want to allow that because Armageddon is one of the biggest industrial planets in the sector. If that falls, then all the subsectors around it will fall to other races because they can't be armed with all the production that comes from this planet. So a huge crusade fleet has been launched to Armageddon, led by none other than Marneus Calgar. Now, Marneus Calgar has come from the Bastior Sub Sector, and he is now launched himself onto Armageddon. Now, this is called Operation Imperator, and along with Marneus Calgar, there is some other legendary figures. You've got Logan Grimnar of the Space Wolves, High Marshal Helbrecht of the Black Templars, and Chapter Master Tushan of the Salamanders. So there's some amazing characters involved in this, and that's just Space Marines. Don't forget, you've got Yarrick, you've got Custodes, you've got Sisters of Battle that are also there, countless numbers of Imperial Guard regiments, Krieg, Cadians, Steel Legion, so many bloody regiments that have descended on this planet to help aid the Imperium to stop this onslaught of endless orcs that are coming in there, just uncountable numbers to try and take this planet back. Where this is going to go, how it's going to be decided, well, currently, as I'm recording this video, this is kind of down to we the players. Over the next couple of weeks, they've said, Games Workshop, that we are going to be the main people that decide when the orcs start taking certain areas of Armageddon. If we help defend it, then we get model releases, previews and stuff for the incoming codexes, and of course the second wave of models coming for Marines and Orcs. So at this moment in time, as I'm recording this, we should be getting some big reveals soon. Now, of course, when you look at some of the characters that are being involved in this, there's some speculation out there. The Crimson Fists are there and stuff. A lot of people want Pedro Cantor. Sadly, Pedro Cantor is not mentioned around Armageddon at this point, but there's other big characters like I've just mentioned. Chapter Master Tushan of the Salamanders, he's more or less deployed his entire chapter now to Armageddon, and there is some speculation that maybe he will be receiving a model. I think that's probably one of the best ways Games Workshop could go, is giving characters like Pedro Cantor, Chapter Master Tushan, Gabriel Seth, etc., Isidon for the Raptors, some love in terms of models. And with these narratives that they've just started now, I think this is the best way they should do it. And the next major war zone we're going to talk about is all around the Maelstrom, and this involves Huron Blackheart, the Red Corsairs, and everyone that wants to get involved in this. So just like the Cadian Gate with Perturabo and the Iron Warriors at the end of 10th edition, getting some big lore, we also got a book dedicated to Huron Blackheart and the Red Corsairs. Huron and the Red Corsairs got a bunch of new model releases, which I thought was absolutely fantastic, but there was some lore in there of Huron hitting back again against the Imperium. The Maelstrom is basically Huron's domain, or he sees it as his domain. Yes, there's orcs in there, there's other Xenos factions in there and stuff like that. The High Lords actually want to start sending some of the chapters that fought with Huron back into the Maelstrom to try and say, right, you fought with him before, you've been reinforced now, go back and finish the job. You're not on a penance anymore, so chapters like the Executioners, the Mantis Warriors, etc., they are being sent back into the Maelstrom to find Huron and potentially try and destroy him. But there's some people out there of the Ordo Astartes that don't trust these orders, because they see that these loyalist chapters once stood with Huron once before. What's to stop them standing with Huron once again? So the Ordo Astartes are trying to throw their wrench in the works, and they don't really trust some of the shenanigans that is really going on at this moment in time. So a lot of political interest, a lot of political, I'm going to say backstabbing, shadow work at play here, as the Inquisition does. Of course, you know, Gilliman being the head of everything, as the Ordo Astartes looking at Gilliman like, should we really even trust this guy? You know, is he the leader that everyone is saying he is? It's getting a little bit spicy now when it comes to politics and who is who and who's on whose side, but that's what it's always been like with the Imperium. But I'm excited to see where this story goes now. I would love another narrative book with Huron fighting against the Executioners and the Mantis Warriors as kind of like a redemption arc for those chapters. I think it would be absolutely fantastic. The Badab War back in the day when all this kicked off is probably one of the greatest piece of narrative lore that Games Workshop ever wrote. And a lot of people, myself included, want Games Workshop, aka Black Labor, to actually expand this into a novel series. And I'm not saying like Horus Heresy wise, where it's like 55 books, maybe 5 to 10 books just covering the basics, or the ins and outs of the Badab War. And jumping from the Maelstrom, let's jump to the Nephilim Sub Sector. Again, another major war zone that's going on, and this has been going on since 9th edition with the Necrons fighting the Imperium. So this is located in the Ultima Segmentum. The Nephilim Sector became infamous after entire worlds suddenly went silent. There was no distress calls, no warp messages, literally no survivors. Imperial authorities discovered that a vast region of space had basically been cut off from the warp itself, creating what became known as the Pariah Nexus. Now, the truth of the Pariah Nexus is a truly horrifying story. The Necron, known as Illuminator Serad, had constructed a colossal network of blackstone pylons that suppressed warp energy across entire star systems. Now, the human populations then began to suffer from this, and they then began to lose used the gradual loss of their souls as the Necrons sought to create a galaxy where psychic life could no longer exist. Now, this brought, of course, a lot of Imperial Crusade fleets to this area of space, and we actually have some of the biggest contenders here right now actually fighting. So yes, you do have like Seraz and stuff like that of the Necron side, but on the Imperium side, the Primarch Guilliman is currently heading there. In some of the latter narrative stuff that we actually got in 10th edition, big characters like Bastior have appeared around this area. The Silent King is also here. This fear is that potentially that could bring Lionel Johnson, another return Primarch, to this area, since he is also hunting some of these demons that have done his chapter wrong. And this could be the big meeting then between Guilliman and the Lion. Currently, again, just like most of the narratives, we are still waiting on the end of this and how it all plays out, but I am hoping in 11th edition we do get some movement on this storyline. We get to see Guilliman, the Silent King, some of the big characters potentially interact and do some things. Did I also mention that Archmagos Belisarius Call has also gone to this area in space? So some of the biggest Imperial players are currently around this area to see what the Necrons are doing and to try and stop their plans. Now let's jump from the southern part of the galaxy, aka the Imperium Sanctus, to the northern part of the galaxy, aka the Imperium Nihilus, because this is where the next major war zone takes place, called the Chalnath Expanse. Now the Chalnath Expanse is one of the largest war zones in Imperium Nihilus, where an entire region of space has become a battleground between the Imperium, the Tau Empire, Genestealer cults, and Orcs. There is some Chaos forces up there, but those are the main warring factions at this time. Now, after the opening of the Great Rift, the Chalnath Expanse was cut off from much of the Imperium. Sensing an opportunity, the Tau Empire launched its Fifth Sphere expansion into the region through the Starside Nexus, seeking to bring the isolated human worlds into the greater good. Now, many of these Imperial worlds willingly joined the Tau Empire, while others descended into civil war. At the same time, hidden Genestealer cults erupted into open rebellion, and the Orcs, seeing this as an advantage, launched massive invasions that swept into the sector, turning the entire Expanse into a four-way war zone. Now, some of the big characters that are taking part in this war zone are characters like Commander Shadowsun, the legendary Tau commander that's leading the Fifth Sphere expansion and the conquest of the Tau in the Chalnath Expanse. On the Imperium side, you've got commanders like Watchmaster Agathon. He's the commander of the Deathwatch forces sent to stop the Tau advance and destroy all these Genestealer infestations that have sprung up across this area. And I am hoping, with the lack of love when it comes to the Deathwatch, this is potentially where we could start seeing some love for them. You could probably argue with the invasion of Segmentum Pacificus, with the Tyranids and stuff, that is a great call for the Deathwatch to get some love, but this is where the Deathwatch are even more mentioned. So I'm hoping, again, fingers crossed, this is where we'll get some love for Deathwatch and you'll start to see some big characters. Now, there is another huge character that has just recently been mentioned here. I actually did a dedicated video to this because I learned new information that Lionel Johnson, again, another return Primarch to the setting, has popped up around the Chalnath Expanse area. He's been fighting against the Tau, destroying the Tau, and saving the Imperial worlds. Now, of course, when it comes to the Lion, he has something in the lore where he can basically forest walk. The Watchers of the Dark do some of their magic, whatever you want to call it. Is it warp? Is it something else? We don't really know. That's one of the big mysteries about the Watchers in the Dark. Even Chaos fear the Watchers in the Dark. So God only knows, Emperor only knows what the Watchers in the Dark could be. But his ability, he can go anywhere in the galaxy, and one of his last known interactions was around the Chalnath Expanse area, potentially in 11th edition. Is that what we're going to see? More Lion, more Dark Angels being involved? The Dark Angels at this moment in time are more or less acting like a legion. They've actually all under the guidance of the Lion. You know, all his chapters know that the Lion has returned, the Rock and everything, the fleet surrounding there. They're going wherever they can to purge the enemies of the Imperium. So potentially we could get some great narratives, some great stories coming from the Dark Angels fighting against the Xenos forces like the Gene Stealers, the Tau and the Orcs around the Chalnath Expanse. I'm really looking forward to see this actually expand and where Games Workshop do take this next major war zone. And the 7th and final major war zone on this galaxy map is the 500 Worlds, Guilliman's domain, the realm of Ultramar. Now, after awakening in the 42nd millennium, Guilliman found Ultramar scarred by the Great Rift. Chaos invasions, tyrannic wars, and centuries of decline had ruined the one glorious sector. Now, the 500 worlds have been fractured with many planets lost, isolated, or are under enemy control. Now, determined to restore his father's dream, Guilliman launched a massive crusade to reclaim and reunite Ultramar. The campaign stretches across hundreds of these star systems, with the Ultramarines and their successor chapters fighting to liberate the worlds from Chaos Warband, Necron dynasties, Tyranid infestations, and alien raiders. Now, of course, Guilliman couldn't oversee this because his guidance was needed elsewhere in the galaxy with all the other major war zones that was happening. So Guilliman promoted one of his sons, Demetrius Titus. He became captain of the second company and was bestowed the title Warden of Ultramar, and he was tasked of reclaiming and defending the legendary 500 worlds. Guilliman then would go out and lead the wider Imperium, and Titus is now responsible for securing Ultramar's interior worlds against all the enemy threats that seek to destroy it. But that's not the only characters that are there. As we stated in the beginning with the Segmenta Pacificus and the Tyranid invasion, Agamemnon, who was the first company captain who was taking place in that Tyrannic war, he has now returned to aid Titus. Apparently, Uriel Ventress is around that area as well, doing his aid, and of course, along with his company. As previously mentioned, there's a lot of brand new successor chapters that Guilliman has now founded with Primaris Marines, and they have basically been given the task of, you are now Space Marines, and you guard the 500 worlds. Now, this goes back to the Ordo Astartes that sees Guilliman actually regaining more and more power and making personal armies. They don't like the taste of that cake. They think Guilliman is seeking to grow his own personal power base, which could lead to him having more authority, having more armies, more men, more destructive power in his arsenal to use against friend or foe. So the Ordo Astartes are sending some concerning messages around saying we really need to watch Guilliman and the forces that are gathering around the 500 worlds, because this potentially could be used against us if Guilliman doesn't like the things that we do. So again, it comes back to even more spicy political lore, a lot of battlefields, a lot of destruction, a lot of mayhem happening around the galaxy at this moment in time. For me, I'm hoping, again, we get even more books, more lore, more characters, more video games all around these epic major war zones. There's so much lore that Games Workshop can build upon that would feed our hunger for these narrative stories, for these epic characters that we love. So fingers crossed, going into 11th, we're going to start seeing more of that, and we will be getting our mouths wet with awesome, awesome lore. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching this video. If you've got any thoughts, feedback, anything like that, post it down below. I would love to get your comments on what your favorite war zone is. If I could you please like the video? And if you're on your mobile device, hype it. I don't know, it's like this kind of new thing now. Like, hype, subscribe. I appreciate if you've done that. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. And I hope you've enjoyed yourself. Have a great evening, day, night, where you are in the world. And goodbye.